Okay, so sit yourself onto your lift. Just come into a cross leg position and just observe that you're sitting level. Just hold onto your knees. Lift up into the chest, elevate the heart area upwards, drawing the shoulders down away from your ears. Just take a few deep inhalations and exhalations. So I was listening to a radio program about breathing the other day, as you do, and it described the in-breath as prolonging life, and that's really true, isn't it? And the out-breath as providing freedom. So the in-breath prolongs life. So with each inhalation, just enjoy the filling of the lungs, because we are lucky to have that opportunity. Just have a little wriggle about. Just make sure you feel evenly placed. Just look down at the floor, look at something that's not moving. And then release your knees, bring your hands into Namaste. Press your palms firmly together, lengthen from the armpits into the elbows. And then with an exhalation, allow your eyes to gently close. Soften the jaw, soften the tongue, soften the throat. And observe that as you soften the tongue in particular, you soften around the eyes and around the forehead. Fill the lungs from the bottom all the way up to the very top of the lungs. Empty your lungs from the top to the bottom. With an exhalation, draw your chin down to meet your chest, lifting your chest up to meet your chin. Just spend a moment to seek to generate a genuine, heartfelt sense of gratitude for something or someone or somewhere. Holding on to that feeling of abundance in the heart area. Hold on to that feeling of abundance, and then release the backs of the hands down towards your knees, palms facing upwards. Just connect the tips of the index and index finger and the thumb, stretching the other fingers away from the palm. Just a gesture of knowledge and peacefulness. And then as you raise your head, allow your eyes to softly open and the focus to softly come back. Hold onto your knees, lift up into your chest, drawing your shoulders down away from your ears. Take a deep inhalation in through the nose. And then turn to the right side, drawing your abdomen across, your ribs across, just observing your resistance. And moving your attention beyond that resistance into areas of the body that present no or little resistance. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose, listening to the breath. Using your out breath to intensify the turn, but obviously with observation of resistance. So each time we come into the pose, each time we turn to the right side, the body responds in a different way. Like every breath is unique, every moment of your yoga practice is unique. So we just learn to draw our attention into it. Gently come back to the center. Hold onto your knees, elevating your heart area upwards. Take a deep inhalation and then turn to the right side, the left side, drawing your abdomen across your ribs and your shoulders. Just observing the sensations of the pose. Observing initially the resistance, if there is any. Observing the difference in the resistance, maybe on this side it feels different to the other, and observing the parts of the body that present no resistance. So you don't just focus on the resistance, you take the entire body into account, drawing your focus as much into the areas of the body that feel free. And then come back to the center. Just hold on to your knees, lift up into your chest, drawing your shoulders down away from your ears. And then just come up off your lift, sit back down onto your heels and just let your legs just mold into the shape of the floor. Just wriggle into the inner heels. So you bring the outer buttock into the inner heel and then push the shin bone into the shin skin. So specifically pushing the bone into the skin, so that the shins make really good contact with the floor. Drive the chest upwards, keep the seat bones in contact with the heels as long as you can, and then come forwards, bringing the palms onto the floor. Keeping the heart area lifted, driving the chin and the chest forwards, spreading the fingers, spreading the palms. Keeping the seat bones down on your heels, lengthening into your arms, lengthening the chest away, lengthening the head away. And then bring your forehead down onto the floor. Listening to the sound of the breath as it enters and as it exits, squeezing the outer elbows inwards. Listen to the sound of the breath as it enters and as it exits. Long, slow, deep, deliberate inhalations and exhalations. Come up onto your knees. Have your hands as wide apart as the mat, stretching the thumbs, the little fingers into the edge of the mat, stretching the thumbs towards each other so that you really spread the palm skin. And then turn the toes under, stay up on your tip toes, and then bend your knees as you lift your seat bones and the tailbone up towards the ceiling. So with knees bent initially to give you lifting the seat bones to give you a sense of elevation in the tailbone. And then begin to straighten the legs. Just observe how your body is feeling in the pose today. So observing, of course, those areas of resistance, but then drawing your focus away from that resistance, just acknowledging that it's there, and then just scanning the body for action. So drawing your observation into the legs, hitting the fronts of the thighs through to the backs of the thighs, lifting the thigh muscle up towards the top of the leg, turning the fronts of the thighs inwards, tightening the kneecaps, pressing the fronts of the knees through to the backs of the knees, activating the shins. That's the hard bit, isn't it? Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Listen to the breath. See if you can bring your heels a little closer to the floor, but without losing the action of the fronts of the thighs, fronts of the shins, the kneecaps. Just observe the physical body for evenness of action, and correct it if it feels uneven. Okay, step your feet forwards, just come up into a standing position. Get a couple of blocks for your hands for half uttanasana, and then plant your feet as wide apart as your mat. The outside edge of the foot in precise alignment with the edge of the mat. Turning your toes inwards, stamping the big toe firmly into the floor. Stretching out into the little toes. Pressing the neck of the big toe into the floor. Lift up into the chest, elevating the heart area up towards the ceiling, driving the chest up to the ceiling. Stretch your arms behind you, spreading the palms. And then bring your hands into your hips, wing your elbows together, lift up into the chest. And then like there is a plank of wood, keeping your back entirely straight, hinge at the hips, coming forwards, keeping the front chest lifted. And then reach down and find the blocks. Just bring the blocks directly underneath your shoulders. So go back to your feet. Feel how the feet make contact with the ground. Does the body feel balanced this morning? Or does it feel like that one side of the body is working more evenly than the other? So spend a little time in the pose. So this morning I feel like there's a real imbalance between the left side and the right side. So we spend time just observing the sensations of the pose, aiming to bring levelness between the legs and the torso, the legs and the arms and the legs. If you can go down any lower, then do, but if you've got a bad back, then maybe stay at the top, on the top lift, just working to find your inner balance, hitting your legs back so that your weight goes into your heels, driving your weight directly down into the center of the heel, lifting up and out of the legs, projecting the chin and the chest forwards. If you can reach the floor, then go down to the floor. I'm just being a little cautious because I've had stiff back. It's been much better actually, but I don't want to push it. If you can reach around the backs of your heels, then draw the chin and the chest inwards, then do that. But all the time, just observing your evenness of action from the inside. And from one moment to the next, maybe that changes. So work to balance the observation and action, particularly the activation, but also the balance of your observation. Maybe your observation is really just the legs or an area of resistance. Drive your observation throughout the entire physical body. And then bring your hands into your hips and then bend your knees on the way up if you need to. And come up into standing, just have the inner edge of the feet together. And then lift up into the chest, elevating the heart area upwards. So that balance of action also comes from balance of observation. So do we observe the areas of resistance or difficulty more than the areas of freedom? Breathe evenly through the nose and out through the nose. So it's like a classroom. If you only focus on the naughty kids, then the really promising kids get left behind. So you have to focus on the holistic body. Just observing the feeling of extension just in Tadasana. Just observe that the left side and the right side is working evenly. Observe that the legs are working as hard as the arms as hard as the legs, the chest as hard as the legs and the arms. So that there is evenness and balance. Bring your arms out nice and wide in toward your chest, and then step or jump your feet nice and wide for trikonasana. And then turn your left toes in, your right leg and foot all the way out. And then bring the hips to face the front. So that makes you do the wrong thing with the leg, doesn't it? Bringing the hips, because the hips naturally want to go here. If you bring the hips to the front, then it turns this leg inwards. So try and do both. Bring the hips to the front and then try and turn the legs outwards. So does this feel like it's all in the legs, or can you action the legs, activate the legs, turning the fronts of the thighs outwards, and then lifting up into the spine, up into the chest, from the heart area out into the arms, evenly activating into both arms. And then come over into trikonasana. But as you come over, does the balance of action land on the right side? Or can you make the left side work as evenly? So turning the thighs from the big toe side to the little toe side. Squeezing the front leg buttock bone forwards, hitting the back leg towards the wall behind you. Turning the abdomen up to face the ceiling, looking up. Has this pose become right leg centric, or can you work to really extend from the hip into the heel of that left leg? Is the right arm doing more work than the left arm? Reach up to the sky with the left arm. And then come back to the center. Just keep your arms outstretched if you can. Turn the right toes in. Left leg and foot all the way out. Bringing the hips to the front, turning the fronts of the thighs from the big toe side to the little toe side, and then maintaining that evenness of action between the left leg and the right leg. Just look up to the top hand, reach up to the sky with that top hand. Just mentally scan the body for resistance, for non-resistance, for evenness of action. So you have to more consciously draw your consciousness into that back leg. That's a lot of consciousness, isn't it? And then come back to the center, bring the feet parallel, and then step or jump the feet back together, and then come into Tadasana. So just observe your Tadasana, just listening to the breath. Breathing even deep inhalations and exhalations. In through the nose and out through the nose, and then raise your arms up. Bring your feet hip width apart, hook the thumbs into the crease of the elbows, wrap your fingers around your elbows, and then come forwards into uttanasana. If you've got a bad back, just bring your arms onto the wall, come in halfway. If you can, just allow the body to hang down. But working with your own back, just working with the legs, with the arms, with the torso, making the action even. So even though this is quite a leg pose, don't forget about the torso, don't forget about the arms, don't forget about the neck and the head. Activate your legs as though you're in Tadasana, turning the fronts of the thighs inwards to give you space in the hips. And then bring your hands down onto the floor, bring your hands into your hips, and then come up into standing position, coming back up into Tadasana. observing the lightness of your energy, just listening to the sound of the breath. Okay, just come down onto your knees for a moment and then turn over the left side of your mat. Just fold it over a little so we can do parighasana, the gate pose. So you fold over the left side of your mat and then put a block, if you've got one handy, just on the right side of the mat for your foot. And then just sit back on your heels. So parighasana requires that your shins make really good contact with the floor. So when you're sitting back on your heels, maybe you get really good contact of the shins on the floor. But if you don't, then get your blanket and just unfold it so that it's big enough for you to kneel on completely. So actually, because for most of us mere mortals, our shins are likely to come up off the mat, then give yourself a bit of extra cushioning underneath your shins, because it will help you to keep your shins down on the floor when we kind of stretch over to the side. So lift up into the chest, press the shins into the floor, lift up into the chest, and then come up onto your knees. So at this stage, this is where you observe whether or not you can keep your shins down. So if you can't keep your shins down at this stage, put a blanket underneath your shins if you haven't done already. Bring your hands into your hips, lift up into the chest, like you're doing Tadasana, but on your knees. Squeeze the elbows towards each other behind you, and then bring the right knee forward. And at this stage, press that left shin really deeply into the mat. Bring the foot out to the side, using the line of your mat to gauge your alignment. And just get this thigh to start to turn. So turn in that thigh. And then stretch over. So there's a slight slant here. We don't want this hip to be sticking out. There's a slight kind of incline here. So we're not kind of sucking in really far, but there's this slight incline here. Lift up into the chest, have your toes on the block. Lift up into the chest. Keep that back shin really firmly pressing into the mat. So keep your left hand on your hip and then stretch over to along the right shin. Doing Tadasana with that, sorry, not Tadasana, trikonasana with that front leg, turning that front leg from the big toe side to the little toe side, keeping that back shin down, lifting up into the heart area, finding that levelness of action, sliding that hand down the leg. If you can bend your elbow, bring the palms face upwards, and then reach up and over, bringing this hand directly over the right foot. Rotating, rotating the abdomen from the floor to the ceiling, keeping the back shin down on the floor. And then come back to the centre. And then come back down onto your knees. So, Andrew, if this is too strong for your ribs, you can do supta baddha, or you can go into trikonasana again. Are you okay? It's your knee. It's your inner thigh. It's your hamstrings, right? Okay. So don't go so wide. If it's the hamstrings, don't go quite so wide with the leg. Just lift up into the chest. Elevate the heart area upwards. Drawing your shoulders down. And then just turn over the right side of your mat. Put your blanket over the top of that, and then stretch out the left side of the mat, and then bring the block onto the other side, and then kneel down. So yeah, this is quite a strong pose for the hamstrings actually, isn't it? So my hamstrings have been feeling tight this week as well. So you just got to kind of go over gently. So maybe if it's really strong in your hamstrings, don't go quite so wide. But you know, as you go over, just go over kind of incrementally so that it's not kind of killing the hamstrings. So press the shins into the floor, lift up into your chest, elevating your heart area up to the ceiling, and then come up onto your knees, pressing the shins really firmly into the floor. Have your hands on your hips, lift up into the chest, and then bring the left leg forwards. And now I want you to, maybe you'll be able to make better action with that back shin. And then come over, just bring that foot in line with the knee, turning the thigh all the way out. So one of the other ways of reducing the hamstring stretch is by really activating that left leg, because often if we overwork in the hamstrings, it's because we kind of put in all of our center of gravity into that back leg. And in trikonasana, it's a little easier to activate that back leg, isn't it? But in parighasana, it feels like it's not quite so possible. So if you're getting really strong hamstring stretch, of course, just observe that and just be, you know, just don't overdo it. But stretch out that leg, turn the thigh all the way out, and then really stamp into that back shin, keeping the shin down, bringing yourself over, just coming over just a little bit. If you've got tight hamstrings, maybe this side isn't the same as the other, turning the abdomen from the ceiling to from the floor to the ceiling, and then reach up and over. If you can turn the palm upwards, bring the elbow down onto the knee, reaching over. Make sure that that hand is directly over the foot. Keeping that back leg really firmly working, keeping the shin pressing firmly into the floor. Okay, come back to the center, and then just bring that leg back. Just sit yourself back on your knees. So the challenge with this one is not to put all of your weight over to that straight leg, isn't it? It's trying to keep the back leg really active, and that's really not that easy, is it? So you've got to, so that's why, you know, have a blanket underneath your shins if you struggle to activate that back leg. Just come up onto all fours, have your hands underneath your shoulders, really spread the palms on the floor, turn your toes under, step back a little, have your feet hip width apart, and then come up into dog down. Breathe even, deep inhalations and exhalations. Listening to the inhalation and exhalation, tightening the kneecaps, lifting the fronts of the thighs up towards the top of the leg, turning the fronts of the thighs inwards, lengthening the side ribs, so hitting the hips away from the shoulders, stretching from the armpits into the hips, from the hands into the wrists, into the armpits, into the hips. Keeping the legs actively engaged, just observing that there is evenness of action. Okay, come down onto your knees. Sit back on your heels and just observe that lightness of energy. That lightness rising up into the chest, into the shoulders, into the neck, into the head. Just breathe even deep inhalations and exhalations. Just keeping the jaw and the tongue and the throat soft. Listening to the inhalation and exhalation. And using the breath to distribute your energy evenly around the body. So maybe it requires distribution into the legs, into the arms, into the head. Okay, and then just come into cross legs. And then get a block on either side of the hips for sukhasana. And then lift up into the chest. Just breathe even, deep inhalations and exhalations. Listening to the sound of the breath. Feeling that you can distribute your energy into the legs and into the arms and into the head. And then reach underneath the right knee. Bring the right elbow onto the block. So the elbow is directly underneath the shoulder. So we create this triangle, this right angled triangle. Hold onto the underside of the knee. Bring your left hand onto your hip. And then turn the chest. But what is happening with this left seat bone? Is it lifting up off the floor, or is it lighter on the floor than the right one? So chances are it is. So push that right elbow really firmly into the floor and then lengthen across into that left seat bone. So it's the triangle. So you keep the right elbow pressing firmly into the floor, lengthening across into that left seat bone so that the left seat bone feels firm. Turn the chest upwards to face the ceiling and then reach up and over. So a similar shape to parighasana, lengthening out those side ribs. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Is that all right for you, Andrew? On that side hip, yeah. Lengthening out, keeping that left seat bone stamping down. So getting the left seat bone to communicate with the right elbow. Keeping that lifted arm straight if you can. And then come back to the centre. So it's a tremendous stretch along the abdominal wall, isn't it? Hold onto your knees, lift up into your chest. So it's that parighasana. It's that parighasana type of stretch. Parsva, that's the word I couldn't think of for some reason. Parsva kind of stretch. So lift up into the chest, drawing your shoulders down. And then reach underneath the left knee. Bring the left elbow directly underneath your shoulder. And then just hold onto the underside of the knee. Press the left elbow into the floor. Stretch across into that right hip. Have the right hand on the hip. Turn the chest up to face the ceiling. Reach up and over, looking underneath the armpit. Pressing that left elbow into the floor. Stretching out into the right hip. Keeping the right seat bone down firmly. And that really intensifies that abdominal wall stretch. Breathe softly but deeply. and then come back to the centre, lift. Hold on to your knees, lift up into the chest, elevating the heart area upwards. And then get the blocks in, bring the blocks in front of you. If you've got a bad back, then you might just want to stay at this stage. Otherwise, just lift up into the heart area as you stretch forwards in half padmasana or cross legs. Trying to keep the seat bones from lifting off the floor. Bring your hands onto the blocks. Just have the heels of the palms of the hands on the blocks, so you can push down into the floor, so you can lift up into the chest. So just walking the blocks away, keeping the heart area lifted. So when we come forwards, it's always important to keep the head lifted, keeping the heart area driving forwards. Try and lengthen into the tailbone. If you can reach along the floor, but if that feels too strong for you, then you can just stay with the blocks. And then you can rest your forehead perhaps on a block. If you're using the blocks underneath your hands, then just keep the head lifted, keep the heart area lifted. If your hands are on the floor, then rest your head down onto the block. Pressing the area between the eyebrows firmly into the block. So you can always have one block on top of another if you need it. Okay, bring your hands underneath your shoulders and then just sit yourself up. Just lifting up into the heart area. Just feeling the lightness of your energy rising up into the chest, into the shoulders, into the head. Just swap the way that you are crossing your legs. So if you're doing half padmasana, put the other foot on top of the thigh. If you're doing swastikasana, just swap the crossing of your legs. Just hold on to your knees. Just spend a moment just to observe, do you feel level in the seat bones? Because often when you sit in the kind of typical way, then the seat bones suddenly don't feel level, do they? So lift up into the chest, so you can just stay here or bring the hands onto the blocks. Just pressing the palms down onto the blocks, lifting up into the heart area, just inching forwards just a little at a time, just seeing how that feels for your hips and for your back. If it's feeling okay in your back and in your hips, then bring your hands down onto the floor, bring a block underneath your head, keep stretching forwards, keep the tailbone down, and then again press your forehead. So again you can create different heights with a couple of blocks if you need to. So just having the area between the eyebrows pressing down into the block firmly, which is a quietening action for the brain. Just listen to the breath. Listen to the sound of the breath as it activates. Feel that you're keeping the tailbone down on the floor. Okay, bring your hands underneath your shoulders and then just push yourself up into a seated position. Just lifting up into the heart area and then turn to the right side, just observing how it feels different to the turn that you did at the beginning, partly because you're probably crossing your legs differently, but also because perhaps there's more space or different space within the body. And then coming back to the center, lift up into the chest and then turn to the left. Taking the back hand into the floor, lifting up into the heart area. And then come back to the center. Just stretch out your legs. And then just come down onto your back and into supta baddha. Have the soles of the feet together, the knees apart. Just resting yourself down into the floor, pushing the heels consciously together. Use blocks underneath your thighs if you need them, just to support the hips, but otherwise just allowing the body to spread outwards from the center. So the hands resting on the floor either side of the body for a moment. And then raise your arms, interlock the fingers, turn the palms of the hands all the way up, and then lengthen your arms along the floor using blocks underneath your hands or a folded blanket if there's stiffness in your shoulders, just to support your shoulders. Breathe even deep inhalations and exhalations. Just raise your arms, swap the interlock of your fingers, turn the palms out, and then again lengthen your arms along the floor. And then bring your arms back to the side of the body. Draw your knees in toward your chest. Pull your knees into the chest. Just have a little rock from side to side, from top to bottom. Just a gentle massage on the spine. Get the blanket from underneath your head. Just come up onto your elbows. Straighten yourself out along the centre of the mat, making sure that you're in a good straight line. Then have the blanket underneath your head and neck, and then just move equipment out of the way if it's in the way, and then allow yourself to completely release into the floor. Just unhooking the muscles of the arms and the legs. Feeling that energy radiating out from the bones and into the muscles. To the organs. Use your in-breath and your out-breath to distribute that feeling of lightness evenly down into the tips of the toes, into the tips of the fingers and up into the top of the head. Just basking in that feeling of energetic lightness. And then when you're ready to disturb yourself, just gently wriggle your toes, wriggle your fingers, just bring yourself back into this pose of shavasana. And then gently draw your knees in toward your chest, just have a little rock from side to side, from top to bottom, just a gentle massage on the spine. And then gently roll onto your right side. Just stay down for a breath or two. And then straighten out the top leg, come back up into a seated position. Just a final cross legs with your hands in the masti, just a final spinal lift. Draw in your breath in through your nose down into the abdomen. Be conscious of the energy that you have released through your practice this morning, that good, positive, healthy flow of clean energy that the extensions and the forward bends and the twists and the inversions bring to the body and to the mind. And then draw your chin down to meet your chest. Spend a moment to seek to generate to acknowledge the positive energy that you have created inside. Hold on to that feeling of abundance, and then send some of that positive energy into the world. And then release the backs of your hands down toward your knees, palms facing upwards. Just connecting the thumb and the index finger, stretching the other fingers away. Just a symbol, a gesture of peacefulness and wisdom and knowledge. And as you raise your head, allow your eyes to softly open and the focus to softly come back. Thank you very much. So hopefully you feel as though you've really lifted your energy, give yourself good, positive energy to put into your day. So thank you very much for joining me.